Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. My name is Marcus Hernandez. I'm not a cop, not a soldier, not anymore. These days, I work as an emergency logistics contractor for the state, which is just a fancy way of saying I show up when things get bad and no one else wants to deal with it. My team specializes in high-risk extractions during winter emergencies, missing persons, stranded hikers, ski resort lockdowns, the kind of calls where regular first responders either can't reach the site or don't have the gear. We operate under a quiet agreement with the Division of Homeland Preparedness. We get funding, access to certain tools, and in return, we don't ask too many questions about why we're the ones being sent in. That February evening, we were dispatched to Pine Ridge Mountain Lodge, a private luxury cabin complex near Twin Peaks Pass, sitting just under 9,800 feet in elevation. The call came through unofficial channels, no 911, no radio dispatch. Just a scrambled message from a contractor contact in Glenwood Springs. Isolated lodge, 6 guests, something's wrong, unstable situation. That's all we got. We were already on standby due to the incoming blizzard, so I grabbed our kits, did a last-minute check of our convoy, 1 up-armored, snow-capable utility vehicle, snowmobiles rigged for medevac, 2 emergency drones, and personal equipment. We travel heavy. Most people don't realize what it takes to move through the backcountry in zero visibility with lives on the line. That includes firearms, sure, licensed, trained, and kept legal for defense purposes in hostile terrain. Too many people forget that when everything falls apart, it's not wolves or weather you have to worry about first. I took point with Jenna Kim riding passenger. She's ex-National Guard, does comms and Overwatch. Behind us, Aaron Doyle, an off-the-books trauma medic who spent years contracting overseas, and Caleb Nguyen, a drone tech with a sharp eye and a calm trigger finger. We weren't expecting a firefight, but the last 3 extraction calls we took in the region hadn't gone clean. People missing, strange behavior, bodies turning up in ravines. Something wasn't adding up. We topped off our fuel reserves, ran diagnostics on the thermal camera, checked the avalanche frequency band, and started climbing. County Road hadn't been plowed in at least a day. The snow was thigh-deep in places, and we passed 2 empty vehicles abandoned in the drifts. No footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, just silence. By the time we were halfway to the lodge, visibility had dropped to 20 meters and the sky was closing in fast. We weren't there to rescue vacationers. We were there to find out why a luxury mountain lodge, fully stocked and fully booked, had gone completely dark. It took us another 20 minutes of crawling through the blizzard before the lodge's silhouette emerged in the swirling gray. Pine Ridge might have been built for comfort. Marble floors, reclaimed timber beams, heated slate patios, but tonight it looked like a derelict fortress carved into the snow. The main entrance's amber floodlights were off. Icicles on the eaves stretched like frozen teeth. No smoke curled from the chimney. I killed the engine and grabbed my flashlight. The beam caught a broken sign. "Welcome to Pine Ridge Mountain Lodge, your sanctuary at 9,800 feet. The metal plaque was bent inward, frost coating the embossed letters. I keyed my mic. "All units, this is Team Lead Hernandez. We're at the lodge entrance, proceeding on foot." Jenna tossed me a quick nod before stepping out to check perimeter on her handheld radio, scanning the ridgelines with her thermal camera. Aaron and Caleb bundled our medkits, ice boots, and extra rations into the back of the vehicle. "Send drone up in 5, Caleb said, stuffing batteries into its pocket, while Aaron snapped latex gloves onto both hands. We had a quarter-mile of uphill trek to cross over the lodge's entry courtyard, but the wind was already building into a howl that threatened to strip flesh. Snowdrifts had covered the stone pavers, making each step a gamble. I took the first few, crampons biting into the icy crust. Something about approaching a structure that once signified warmth now felt wrong. As I neared the front doors, frosted glass, splintered wood, Jacob from Villa 8, a second-generation owner, rang the doorbell over a dozen times earlier that afternoon. Their luxury tarping system had malfunctioned, but why no response? If someone had fainted or slipped, they'd at least try to call the front desk. Now, nothing. My mind ticked through scenarios: medical emergency, mechanical failure. but something darker tugged at my gut. "Everyone stay close," I whispered over the wind. "Watch for trip hazards." Jenna circled left, using infrared to scan behind the shuttered garage doors. Aaron used a thermal readout from door crevices, 0. Cabin temps at 40 degrees, but no human signatures. I fitted my headlamp and hit the main corridor switch. Nothing. No hum of electricity, no flicker of lights, only the echo of the wind slapping against the multi-pane windows. I tried again. Nothing. I rapped on the door. The hollow echo told me the lodge was void of life at the main entrance. Around back, the mechanical bay was open, blackness instead of the usual glow. I motioned for Jenna. "Front's dead. Let's check perimeter entry from the west wing." She nodded. Past the veranda, I followed the stone walkway to a side door. The keypad was dead, its plastic keys cracked and frozen shut. I hummed a jog toward the basement stairs I'd memorized from schematics, a delivery chute, usually locked. If someone left through a rear service door, they'd likely try the emergency exit here. At the top of the stairs, I felt the first pulse of dread, a low metallic moan mixed with the wind. It came from deep within. My fingers clenched on the pistol at my hip, a semi-auto 9mm with hollow point rounds. I made sure the safety was off. If this was a stray elk or a loose generator, fine, but if it wasn't, I needed the option to act fast. I stepped down 10 stairs. Each tread was slick with snow that had blown in. At the bottom, the moonlight from a shattered window revealed overturned chairs, a buffet cart tipped over, springs from a broken cot scattered on the floor, blood spattered against a wall. The metallic copper smell was faint but unmistakable. Aaron huffed down the stairs behind me. Jenna and Caleb followed. I tapped my light across the hallway. A pool of dark liquid had dripped toward a cracked door at the end of the corridor. The latch was twisted. I reached out and pulled. It opened with a high creak. Inside was an empty kitchen, pots still hanging on racks, frost clinging to the stovetop. The pantry door lay ajar. I cleared to the counter, noticed bullet holes in the stainless steel backsplash. Someone had fired here. Jenna's beam picked up a thermal imprint. 6 hours old, maybe more. Aaron flicked on his headlamp and ran a gloved finger across the crystallized droplets on the floor. Blood's been here a while, coagulated in the cold. The corridor beyond slanted toward the main hall, but half a dozen charred footprints led to a service elevator shaft. One print had a thread pattern from a generic hiking boot. Another had a diamond pattern, military surplus, but a civilian still could buy them. I whispered into my throat mic. "We've got signs of a struggle. Let's clear the lobby." At the top of the service elevator door, the steel panel was bent. Someone forced it open. I pried it wider enough for Jenna to slip her shoulder through. Inside, elevator cables dangled like dead vines, the car itself missing. A small embankment of broken tools suggested they tried to jam it open. But why? Maybe they never made it in, or they fled deeper into the lodge. I glanced at the hole in the floor where the elevator once glided. A light wind puffed down from an unseen vent, cold, stale. I motioned up the corridor. "Jenna, you clear right. Aaron, left. Caleb, drone up at 30 feet. Watch our backs. I'll push ahead." We fanned out. Jenna checked each door with her pistol drawn. Aaron prepped a small trauma kit in case he found casualties. Caleb stuffed spare batteries into the drone while biting his lip, waiting for the launch signal. One door opened into the grand lobby. I saw the factory-installed polar panorama behind the front desk, floor-to-ceiling windows that should have offered a view of snow-capped peaks. Tonight, they were opaque with ice. Reception was a mess. Brochures strewn, countertop splintered, the bell with a dented top, no staff. An overturned Appletini glass lay on the desk, a smear of red liquid staining the granite. I raised my light. At the far side, the grand staircase was blocked by a column of overturned furniture, couches and chairs jammed to form an impromptu barricade. Footprints in blood led past it, back towards the main hall. The glass chandelier overhead hung crooked, a dozen crystals missing. A single slipper lay beneath, coated in snow. "Numbers?" I whispered. Jenna's voice crackled. "No movement behind the barricade. Thermal shows 6 points deeper, down the hallway, near West Wing Suites. 2 more upstairs, faint. Could be heat from the boiler." I swallowed. "Drone?" Caleb's voice chimed through my earpiece. "Launching now," then the whir of propellers. The feed flickered on my helmet display. I saw the hallway, frost-coated red carpets trailing into darkness. 4 figures, pale, hunched, moving in jerks. I tapped my ear. Are they alive? He tilted the drone to show a side view, eyes glowing red-orange, limbs rigid, flesh splotched with frost. Too fast for an ordinary person, even injured. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. I hissed, "Jenna, they're not survivors." She swallowed. 5 meters, closing fast. I holstered my flashlight. "Keep them in sight. Aaron, prep meds. If we find survivors, they'll need treated for hypothermia and trauma. Caleb, mark the 3 o'clock exit. We go loud in 3, 2, 1. I sprinted from behind the front desk, slid across the marble floor, and squeezed the threshold into the main hallway. My pistol barked once, catching one figure in the forehead. It crumpled, face shattering like frozen clay. The other turned, mouth opening in a silent scream. I fired again, 2 rounds into its chest. It dropped with a thud. Jenna swept her pistol across the hallway, taking out 2 more. The final one stumbled against the barricade, trying to wrench furniture aside. We stepped forward and I chambered another round. "Go for the heads. Neck shots won't stop them," Jenna yelled. She was breathing hard, 1 round left in her magazine. I holstered the pistol and drew my rifle. Compact rifle chambered in .223, fitted with high-penetration rounds. 2 quick taps on the shoulder of the nearest infected. Its brain caved in. Aaron and Caleb moved past me, using the muzzle flash to search for heat signatures deeper in the lodge. Caleb reported, 2 down the hall, 5 upstairs, possible survivors in basement area, heat signatures low but steady near the old storage lockers. I felt a pulse of guilt squeezing my chest. These things used to be people. I flexed my grip on the rifle. Clear a path to the basement, leave no one standing. Jenna slid her last round, lifted her pistol for another shot as the creature at the barricade dropped. Once the hallway was free, we converged on the west stairwell. 2 more erupted from the shadows, 1 halfway up, 1 halfway down, less than 8 feet apart. I fired 3 controlled shots from the MA5, cracking open skulls like fragile porcelain. The glass chandelier above disintegrated into an avalanche of crystals that tinkled against wood before falling into the snow. We reached the bottom landing of the north stairs and found a pair of heavy metal doors marked Service Corridor. The knob was iced over, so I jammed my shoulder into it. It swung open to reveal a narrow hallway lit by a single flickering emergency bulb. The walls were lined with industrial shelving and janitorial supplies. At the far end, I saw 3 silhouettes pressed against a frozen cinder block wall, shivering, huddled together behind barricades crudely formed from storage carts. I lowered my rifle's light to reveal faces. One was a middle-aged couple, wedding rings still on their fingers, faces hollow with fear. Next to them, a teenage girl with a bruise across her forehead clutched a blood-stained teddy bear. They sank to their knees as I approached. I stowed the rifle and pulled off my gloves. "I'm Marcus Hernandez. I'm here to help you. You're safe now." The woman's lips trembled as she tried to form words. "Our friends," she whispered. "We tried to barricade. They came through the glass. Teeth, eyes." She pointed to the hallway. I flicked on my light to identify small footprints in blood. They looked human but irregular, too elongated, too narrow. I signaled Jenna to stay alert. "Give them space," I said. "Are there any others with you?" The young girl spoke, voice barely audible. "Dad went upstairs to check the hallway. He told us to stay." She held out a piece of paper, a hastily scrawled note in cursive, ink smudged by water. It read, "They came through the dining room. We locked basement. Do not go upstairs. Please. I love you." Signed, Roger Franklin. I nodded. "We'll find him." I squatted, placing a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "My medic Aaron will take care of you. Jenna, cover rear. Caleb, feed the drone up again. Check upstream for movement." Aaron moved in, unzipping his bag, checking for injuries, shivering but no broken bones. He offered them thermal blankets and sealed water pouches. The teenager Marisol looked at me, frightened. "I'm going to get your dad," I said softly. She nodded, tears freezing on her lashes. Jenna and Caleb faded back up the corridor's length while I keyed my mic to call for a medevac staging area. No signal, only static. I sighed, turning back to the family. "Stay here. We'll check for your husband." I slid my rifle back onto my shoulder, carefully advanced toward the stairwell to the east wing. The basement corridor was 3 meters wide and arched into a vaulted ceiling. The tile floor was dirty from 3 days of guests leaving without cleanup. I caught a glint of metal at the top of the stairs, another elevator door, this one scuffed and dented. Heat signatures spiked on Jenna's thermal feed. 2 upstairs, each faint but moving. I motioned for Jenna to follow, and we moved cautiously up the stairs. Each step was coated in a thin film of ice. We stayed low, following the heat. At the top we paused. The hallway split left and right. To the left, a small reading nook, a collapsed bookshelf and mouldering armchair. No movement there. To the right, the hallway led past 4 guest rooms. At the end was a set of double doors to the main lounge. I nudged Jenna. She crept to the door's edge, rifle raised. I whispered, "Count?" "2," she replied, heart rates flat. Probably not alive in the normal sense. I toggled my bolt release and eased open the door. Steam spilled out, smoke rising from a broken gas lantern on a coffee table. The lounge was in shambles, half the furniture tipped, a fireplace burning low, logs hissing where rainwater doused the flames. 2 forms knelt near the fireplace, facing away from us. The thermal camera registered them at 39 degrees, slightly above ambient. But as we stepped inside, they lurched at the hiss of the gas, their heads snapped around, eyes completely black, cheeks split in frozen grins, veins blue against pale skin. I squeezed the trigger, 1 round to the skull of the first. Flesh gave way to bone. The second spun and lunged, arms extended, fingers clawed. Jenna drilled around into its chest. Shrapnel from the broken lantern clinked against the floor. We backed out to regroup. "Roger Franklin?" I called. "If you're alive, step forward." Silence. No answer. Jenna scanned the room with the thermal camera. 3 low heat signatures collected near the east windows, likely hiding or already frozen under the snow. We cut a path towards them, firing at shadows as they emerged. 1 figure crashed through a window grate, falling into the snowdrift outside. The second tried to climb over a sofa back, snagging its coat, then fell onto a coffee table with a crash of glass. I aimed at its head, just as it snapped its jaw at me. The bullet shattered its skull. Its body slumped into the broken glass, sending shards scattering. The third stood near the hearth, flames reflecting on its frozen tears. I fired 1 round. The projectile lanced through its mouth, exiting behind. The body drenched in blackened blood before collapsing. Through the haze, I heard muffled rustling behind a locked door near the bar area. I forced it open and found a small storage closet. Inside, Roger Franklin lay face down on a pile of blankets, breathing ragged through a frost-smeared face. He tried to lift his head when he saw me, bringing a meager nod. I knelt, pulling off gloves to check his pulse. Weak, but present. Blood trickled from a bullet graze on his forearm. He tried to speak. "Kids." "In basement," he gasped. "Went down. Door jammed." I secured a temporary bandage to his arm with a torn shirt sleeve. "Help is here," I promised. I keyed my mic. "Base, this is Hernandez. I have 1 male adult, possible concussion, forearm laceration. Need evac for medical evaluation. 2, alive in basement." No response. I cursed under my breath. Jenna had moved to the window. "Storm's picking up. We need to move downhill now. Keep it quiet." I nodded. I looked back toward the corridor. "Jenna, get them to the service elevator exit. I'll signal when I clear the basement." She went to radio traffic to Aaron and Caleb. "Move the family up here. We have the host. Exit via west stairs. Leave room locked until extraction." I returned to the lounge's center, stood over Franklin. His hand hovered near his side. He stared at the ceiling as if expecting angels. "Sir, I need your help leading the way back. Can you walk?" He nodded, wincing. I supported him as slowly I guided him toward the exit. Each step required care. His boot prints in a thin, blood-soaked trail tracked his fall through the lounge. I kept him upright by his waist. There was no time to waste. Outside, the wind crashed against us as I opened the door. blinding white fury. Jenna caught Franklin and we maneuvered him around the drift to a low point near the service corridor entrance. Caleb appeared from the shadow with a dusting of snow, 3 drones feathering above, mapping heat signatures behind us. Aaron followed, carrying a small med bag and a freshly unwrapped heat pack. I slapped a cold hand to my ear. "Time estimate, Caleb?" 2 minutes to link up with the family, he said. "Internal cameras show no more movement below the lounge. 2 heat signatures at the basement exit, likely under blankets." I exhaled. "Good, let's go." We moved Franklin along the outside wall of the lodge towards the basement entrance, where a metal door led to a short stairwell. Jenna signaled with a quick motion, and I swung the door open. Inside, the cold air pushed us back. I flicked on my headlamp and saw the couple and their daughter huddled against a wall, each swathed in half-frozen blankets. The girl's eyes were glazed, but when she saw her father, she let out a sob that echoed off the concrete. I leaned close. "We're taking you to safety. Follow our lead." Aaron knelt to check their vitals. The couple's core temps were dipping, signs of early hypothermia. He warmed a pouch of saline under his jacket, then ran a line into each adult's arm. Slow, steady, just enough to keep them stable. The saline infused slowly and the color returned to the mother's cheeks. I steadied them as they rose, staggering on numb limbs. Rachel, the mother, managed a faint smile at her daughter. "You saved us," she whispered. "No," I said. "Your husband kept you alive." I motioned Franklin to the stairs. We spent the next 5 minutes checking each stair tread. Frost had collected on the metal handrail, so I used my glove to grab. Once we reached the ground level, I steered them northward around the building's west side, aiming for a small ridge that jutted from the tree line. Snow here was less windblown, more packed, offering firmer footing. Jenna and Caleb scanned ahead with thermal until they picked up a third signature, likely a service technician who might have stayed behind. But when we reached the pull-out for propane tanks, several 40-pound cylinders lay in a tipped cage. They were empty. No technician. I looked at my team. "Keep moving. Get them uphill." I fixed Franklin with a direct look. "Sir, can you manage without help for a bit? I need to check the boiler room for survivors or hazards." He nodded meekly. The pair and their daughter moved up the slope, guided by Jenna and Aaron. Caleb provided overwatch. I approached the mechanical bay door. It struggled open under my shoulder. The room was full of oversized heating units, industrial furnaces and water pumps. Pipes clanged overhead. A furnace glowed with a low flame, but no heat reached the far corner. I rifled through a small desk area, blueprints, maintenance logs, a notebook stamped January 15th, no entries since. I pushed deeper. On a steel shelf, I found a half-crushed propane lantern and a small can of fire starter. I pocketed them, emergency gear for later. Then I heard it. A faint scraping near a metal hatch in the floor. I tapped Jenna on the shoulder. She trained her rifle ahead. We both moved toward the hatch. The sound grew, a distorted shuffling. I depressed the latch, and the hatch swung inward to reveal a darkened crawl space 15 feet deep. A faint gasp emanated, someone trapped below. I grabbed a pair of bolt cutters from a tool rack and clipped the chain around the basement exit grate. We slid the grate aside. Down below, pitch black. I fired a single green chemlight flare into the space. Its glow revealed 2 motionless forms huddled near a grain bin, one limp, one shaking. I heard shallow breathing. Jenna descended first, her headlamp fixed on the figures. A young couple, each frozen to the bone beneath a thin layer of snow and ice. I knelt and checked pulses. They were faint, but present. I lifted the male unclothed arm. The skin stung like hell, but it moved under my touch. Aaron joined us, peeling away layers of sodden jackets to expose frostbitten flesh. He squeezed my shoulder. "They're going into shock. Gotta get them out." He spotted a nearby terrycloth towel. "Wrap their heads. Get them breathing warm air." I threw a human heat pack under the wife's parka, peeled off her beanie to reveal frost forming on her scalp. I pressed my cheek to her ear. "Stay with me. We're taking you out." She blinked, weakly drawing breath. Jenna secured the man's arms for lift. I signaled Caleb to bring up the rescue sled. He reached down and braced the couple, one in each arm, slowly carrying them up as though they weighed half their normal mass. My arms strained under their weight, numb from the cold creeping in. At the top, I grabbed a thermal blanket from Aaron's pack and draped it around them. Jenna and I guided them toward the ridge edge where the rest of the group waited. 4 sets of footprints led from the group to the ridge, our exit route. We moved slowly, each step a challenge. The couple's bodies were cold as ice. Their shivering clothed them in a white plume of frost. Around the ridge I noticed faint heat signatures, 3 moving in the opposite direction. In my gut, I knew they were infected. They'd likely crossed through a hole in the east wall of the lodge, avoiding detection. If they reached us, they'd pick us off one by one. I whispered, "Jenna, get the family and the patients behind that fallen pine. Defend that position. I'll hold at the ridge edge. Caleb, you drone duty. Watch for any movement east of the ridge. Aaron, stay with the couple. Keep them quiet. Keep them conscious. We need them alive." With a curt nod, they dispersed. I crouched at the ridge's edge, rifle up, breath steady. 4 infected poured over the crest, sliding down on hands and knees, emitting that low moan that shook me to the core. Their skin glistened with frost, eyes sunken, arms jerking in staccato. I exhaled and squeezed off a burst, 2 into the first one's brain case. It snapped forward, spitting teeth. I reloaded in seconds, finger frozen on the bolt. The second lurched halfway, then curled into its own vomit of frozen blood. A third sprinted down, arm outstretched. I took a single precision shot behind the ear. Its head fractured. The 4th hesitated, then surged. I pumped the rifle's action, swung on it, and fired. The bullet exploded its eye, morsels of bone scattering. The body convulsed, then lay still. I rose, scanned the ridge. No more came. The wind howled. I adjusted my grip on the rifle's stock and knelt. Below, the couple lay supine on the rescue sled, their heads entwined in blankets. Marisol's face stayed turned toward the slope, clutching her father's hand. I felt a pang stronger than any bullet recoil. The world had ended for these people. If I failed now, they died in the snow, alone. "Marcus!" Jenna's voice called from behind. I turned to see her standing near the fallen pine, pistol drawn, breathing heavily. They're gone for now. The family's intact. The couple's alive, but only just. I exhaled, letting the air steam out. We need to get them down into the trees. The slope beyond the ridge curves into a gully that leads to a creek bed. From there, follow the tree line south into Dead Man's Run. I know an old ranger cabin where we can shelter. Jenna nodded, shouldering her rifle. Let's move. We formed a protective ring around the group, our 4 survivors, plus Franklin and the couple on the sled. I counted 9 bodies in the snow where the infected lay, half buried, blackening. A single ember drifted from the abandoned lodge chimney, landing a dozen yards away, then sputtering out. I led them across the ridge. Every step was a battle against gravity. Each person's foot sank 6 inches before catching cold. Jenna stayed abreast, scanning with her thermal. Caleb guided the unmanned drone ahead at 10 feet altitude, mapping a path down the gully. Aaron half carried the tote of supplies behind us. An hour later, we emerged into the creek bed. The gully's walls rose 15 feet on either side, steep slopes on both edges. Snow here was 2 feet deep, but less windblown. The creek itself was half frozen, running beneath a sheet of ice. We laid down a thermal blanket as a barrier between the survivors and the cold ground. I poured hot water from my insulated flask into paper cups, handing one to John Franklin. His blue lips trembled as he sipped. "Thank you," he rasped. The blood on his shirt had soaked through, dried into a dull black stain that looked like old rivulets of oil. I nodded, checking my watch. 21:03 hours. We'd been moving for nearly an hour since the extraction. Fatigue gnawed at my legs. The cold seeped into my bones. We rest 5 minutes, then push into the forest. We'll go single file off the obvious path. Stay down, I'll clear ahead. Any sound, you freeze. Jenna kneeled beside me. "Team, take 5. She ran fingers over her wool hat, frost catching on the fibers. "Aaron, any chance let them walk 2 miles to that cabin by dawn?" Aaron checked his wrist pulse oximeter on Franklin. 92%. "If we maintain 1.5 miles per hour through these conditions, maybe by 0400 hours, but I don't know if he lasts." Jenna rubbed her jaw. "We've got to manage a compromise. We need shelter before hypothermia sets. No chance traveling the rest in the open." I exhaled. "I know a downed logging road east. If we can reach that by 0200 hours, we might jury rig a signal. Otherwise, no evac until morning. I clenched my jaw. Crew, gear check, rations, med supplies, weapon status, make ready for departure. Over the next 2 minutes, we rediscovered ourselves. Gloves replaced, magazines topped up, headlamps adjusted to low. The couple sat side by side, heads bowed, Marisol leaning on her mother's shoulder. I caught the girl's eye. "You're safe," I said. She nodded, staring at her reflection in the ice streaks of the creek. Aaron held her father's head upright. Franklin's eyes had sunk into their sockets. His lips whispered a prayer. I realized this night had imprinted itself on these families forever. I keyed the radio. "Base, this is Team 1. Primary evac delayed. We have 6 non-critical survivors. 1 critical, wounded male. Cold exposure imminent. No further hostile contact. En route to safe site. Over." Static. No answer. I glanced at Jenna. "We're on our own." She gritted her teeth. "Move!" I took point again, marching up the eastern side of the gully. At every 10 paces, I paused, aimed my rifle across the creek bed, and checked thermal readings. Nothing moved. We climbed through a tunnel of spruce, branches weighed down by snow, trunks spaced every 5 feet. We avoided the main creek channel, clambering instead on a ledge 10 feet above, where the drift was only a foot deep. Every breath steamed in front of me, frost built on my lashes. "Stay focused," I muttered. "No shots unless they're within 15 feet. We need to conserve ammo." Jenna was directly behind me, her pistol tucked to one side, the other hand tapping rhythms into her thigh, listening to wind shifts. Flames from the retreating blaze above cast a red glow on the eastern sky, still visible through the branches. That glow faded quickly, replaced by the uniform grey of the storm clouds. After 20 minutes, we reached a flat stretch where the gully opened into a small clearing. The snow here showed tracks, mammal prints, perhaps deer, maybe coyotes. I knelt, brushed away snow from a hoof print. It measured 6 inches across, split in 2, not a hoof. A single glowing ember in the flickering lantern light made me think of coyotes. Jenna crouched, rifle on her knee. Winds shifting, a 12-degree gust from the northwest. We'll need to adjust as we go. We moved another 50 feet and reached the logging road, abandoned a decade ago. Tree trunks blocked most of the path, but the remaining space was just wide enough for a snowmobile. That's where we'd left 2 vehicles earlier. I exhaled, relief and tension tangling in my chest. Franklin's breathing rattled as Jenna and Aaron helped him climb onto the sled. The couple and Marisol followed, huddled beneath 2 thermal blankets. The cold was breaking them. "We'll take turns pulling," I said. Jenna loaded her last rounds, then stowed it. She grabbed the sled's tow rope. Caleb slid on his own snowshoes and braced the sled's front. Aaron and I took the handles, no more thermal cameras, batteries drained to 10%. We would rely on night vision until it died. The road snaked northward. We moved in steady rotations. Franklin mumbled as he rode, eyes half closed. Marisol lay across her mother's lap. I glanced over my shoulder. The tree line curved west, but I saw no heat signatures. If the infected knew we fled downhill, they might intercept. "Hypothermia sets in below 2 degrees Fahrenheit within 20 minutes if you can't keep your core above 82, Aaron said quietly. "We have emergency blankets, but keep moving. No one stops." I nodded. "Keep talking to them. If they lose consciousness, we'll have to carry them, and that slows us by half." We pressed on. The air battered us at a 30-degree angle. Snow, half a foot deep, clung to our gear. By 22:15 hours, we'd covered 1.2 miles. Frostbite nibbled at exposed skin. My cheeks stung, fingers numb. I reached for a small hand warmer Jacobs had slipped into my jacket. I tucked it under my glove. The sudden blast of heat was relief itself. At 22:30, Jenna called a halt at an old ranger cabin half a mile off the road. The structure was 2 stories, built of logs and stone, collapsed one side of the roof. We huddled inside the ground floor. Floorboards splintering under knee pressure, rough-hewn walls. No windows. A layer of snow coated everything. The dim light of our headlamps lit iron brackets for a stove that had been torn out long ago. We found a stack of firewood in a corner, damp but salvageable. "Get them inside," I ordered. Aaron and Jenna hoisted Franklin onto a cracked wooden cot in the back corner. The couple and Marisol settled near the stove's opening. I rifled through my packs for matches and found a striker. Caleb circuited around the woodpile, grabbing the driest logs, brittle at the core. I set them near the stove's base and struck a match. It sputtered, then caught a small kindling twig. Flames flicked upward, wind roared outside. I slid logs into the incinerator's cavity. Sparks licked the edges of broken bricks. The heat was immediate and sharp, a single jet of breath expelled from each survivor's lips. I crouched by Franklin, removing his frozen gloves. He stirred, gasping. Snow. It burned. His cheeks were glazed white. I dabbed his forehead with a towel. "You're alive," I said. "Let it warm you." Aaron checked pulse and breathing. He's shivering violently, shallow breaths, still hypothermic. He strapped a blow-up pillow to Franklin's chest to restrict airflow enough to force deeper breaths. Jenna leaned against the aged wooden post, wiping frost from her lens. Drone detected 2 heat signatures east of here, about 50 yards along the road. Could be survivors, could be infected. We need to check at dawn. I nodded. Night vision's going to die soon. We need to rest before then. Once it's out, it's pitch black. Caleb grabbed 2 packs of rations and a thermos of hot coffee. He poured 3 cups, handing one to Aaron, who slurped it, one to Jenna, and one to me. The liquid burned my tongue, but settled into my gut like a warm anchor. We didn't talk much. Just the quiet clink of spoons in ration packs, the hiss of wind outside, and the flicker of firelight on the walls. I leaned back against my pack, feeling the warmth sink deeper into my limbs. The last thing I remember before drifting off was Marisol whispering, "Thank you," to no one in particular. The next thing I knew, cold had crept back into my jacket. I stirred, blinked, and saw the stove's embers still glowing in the corner. Franklin lay on his back, eyes fixed on the ceiling, unmoving but awake. The family was still curled up against the rear wall, soft clouds of breath rising from their faces in the dark. Jenna sat beside me, rubbing my arm gently. "Night vision's gone," she whispered. I nodded and nudged her elbow. "Let's take watch rotations. I'll hold last watch. You take the first 2 hours." She gave a faint nod and ducked toward the stairs. She'd been running on fumes since before dusk. I sat up and checked Franklin's pulse, steady at 86 beats per minute, breathing still shallow but a little stronger than before. I probed his leg for frostbite. Leg muscles felt stiff but no blackened flesh. I poured hot water into a blanket bundle, tucked it at his feet so the heat could rise. Next to me, Caleb stirred from sleep. "Thermals still show heat near the road," he whispered, tapping his small handheld scanner. 2 points, one moving slowly, might be another survivor. I slipped on my boots. "Let's go check." I motioned to Jenna. "Cover us here if anything moves." She signaled. I snapped the rifle's safety off and led Caleb out. The front door of the cabin had warped, but it opened inward. Outside, the wind had eased to a whisper. The half-moon peeked between cloud cover, glinting on the snow. I toggled my headlamp to low. Caleb hovered beside me, rifle at port arms. We followed an old ski trail, 6 feet wide, leading back toward the logging road. Half a mile away, I heard something crash through the timber, cracking branches, a dragged thud. I paused, listening. A silhouette emerged at the road's edge, hunched, stumbling, shaking, not attacking. I raised my light. A man wore a tattered parka, snow packed into his hair. He looked at me, dazed. I waved cautiously. "Hold on, stop!" He staggered toward me, arms out. He collapsed face first into the snow, letting out a weak moan. I dashed forward, lifting his shoulders. He was alive, breathing but shivering violently. "Medic," I called. In seconds, Jenna and Aaron appeared, groggily shining their lights. Aaron checked his vitals. Severe hypothermia, core temperature hovering around 82, heartbeat uneven. He needed heat and a line in fast. Jenna draped a blanket around him as Aaron set up a fluid infusion. "He's a guest?" I asked Aaron. Aaron shook his head. "Clothing brand mismatch, cheap pullover, no lodge badge, no ID. Could be a local skier who got lost." He checked a pocket. A half-empty pack of cigarettes labeled revelation, and a lighter. No wallet. I crouched beside the man whose eyes were glazed. "I'm Marcus Hernandez. You're safe now. What's your name?" He blinked, slurred. "Jamie. I'm Jamie Collins." "Jamie, you're coming with us. We'll warm you up," I said, guiding him to his feet. He tried to stand, legs buckling. Aaron helped hold him. Caleb and I each took an arm. We trudged back to the cabin. Jenna keyed her light inside and guided them to a cot opposite Franklin's. "2 more. We might be at full capacity," she muttered. Inside, I set the man on a space blanket on the floor, pressed another warm pack under his shoulders. Aaron hooked up an IV. Franklin and the family stirred, blinking at the new bodies surfacing in the half-light. Marisol tugged at her mother's sleeve, squeezing her hand. I felt the world tilt in front of me. Another survivor, another team member to care for. Supplies were limited. I counted: Franklin, Rachel, Tom, Marisol, the other couple, 7, plus Jamie Collins. That made 8. Jenna and I were 9, Aaron and Caleb, 11. We could at most manage 12 before medical supplies ran dry. We needed to find more gear. I turned to Jenna. "Morning's coming. We push toward Dead Man's Run. We need supplies, blankets, meds, food. Probably scattered in the vehicles up the Ranger Road. But we risk more exposure." I paused, watching frost creep along the base of the doorframe. "No choice," she nodded. "Let's wake the group. We move at 0500. By the time pale grey light filtered through the broken rafters, the wind had finally eased. It wasn't warm, but it was less hostile. Still air and cold silence, like the mountain was holding its breath. Shapes began to shift beneath ragged blankets as people stirred. Aaron moved between them, checking vitals. Franklin's pulse was 92 now, core temperature climbing to 95. Not good, but it meant he had a fighting chance. Tom and Rachel sat near the stove, passing a cup of warm water between them. Marisol clung to her mother, half asleep. Jamie groaned as he stretched, wincing from joints gone stiff with cold. The last couple, Mark and Elise Barnett, sat close to Aaron, who gently examined Elise's blackened fingertips. "We'll thaw your hands later," he told her quietly. I pulled my pack over one shoulder and stepped into the center of the room. "All right," I said. "Everyone up. We're moving. Goal is the old logging road by 0600. We'll check the wrecks for supplies, then push on to Dead Man's Run cabin. Keep moving, no breaks. If you fall behind, someone will drag you. Let's go." They nodded, faces drawn but determined. Jenna handed out ration bars, each 500 calories. I distributed 2 each. Eat half now, half later. I passed around a canister of electrolyte powder. They dissolved it in their insulated mugs. Franklin sipped slowly, face pressed against his wife's shoulder. At 0530, we shouldered packs, lightweight, containing spare socks, bandages, half a day's worth of MREs, and moved out. I signaled Jenna to lead on the ridge, radius 10 feet so we could cover each other. Caleb stayed at the rear, scanning with his handheld thermal scanner. Aaron brought up the rear, carrying a small medical kit, making sure no one lagged. The logging road was a ribbon of packed snow winding through a tunnel of spruce. We encountered no more infected signs, no footprints except ours, so the night's events had gone quiet. I exhaled freely for the first time since dusk. The children trudged bravely beside their parents, holding hands. Jamie shuffled, using steady breaths to keep from collapsing. At 0600, we reached the snowmobiles, a pair parked side by side, half buried by drifting snow. Their seats and wind guards were coated in ice, but the engines turned over on the first try. I tapped each throttle, both revved at a meager idle. Good. I quickly drained one snowmobile's gas tank into jerry cans, likely contaminated with water, but enough to keep us moving slowly. "Load up," I said. "Take 3 at a time. I'll sweep for supplies. Oil, any medical kits left over." Jenna tossed me a slick pack labeled Emergency Field Pack, clipped to her belt. I unzipped it. 2 trauma kits, 4 field dressings, 3 pairs of insulated gloves, a box of hypothermia packs, and a stash of morphine auto-injectors. That stash would save lives. I grabbed an extra thermal blanket and shoved it behind my seat. Aaron checked his own pockets. "We have 6 trauma kits total, some cold packs, saline, spare IV tubing." He slung his med bag across his shoulder. Enough for one more extraction. Caleb found an avalanche beacon in the snow with torn straps. "This one's dead," he said. "But I have my drone controller, last battery half charged. We can launch from the ridge again if needed." I strapped the rifle across my back, slung the ambulance radio over my shoulder, and climbed onto the first snowmobile. Jenna took the second. We threaded through the trees in a staggered formation, each rise revealing another stretch of frozen logging road. By 0630, we reached the Dead Man's Run junction. The wooden signpost was iced over, but still readable. Dead Man's Run cabin, 3.2 miles. I let out a slow breath. If the machines held, we could be there by 0730, and once there, with luck, we could get a signal out. I motioned. 2 up front, 2 in middle, 2 at rear. Rotate drivers every half mile. Aaron, you stay with Franklin on the sled behind my snowmobile. Rachel and Marisol go with Jenna. Jamie and Barnett's go with Caleb's. Everyone nodded. We set off again. The ride was bumpy, snow-packed ground, occasional stumps. The wind had jaunted, blowing the ridge's snow across the road. I followed Jenna's taillight. The idle throttles rattled as we cut through the morning hush. At 0700, we passed an overturned moose carcass, one half buried in a drift, the other half frozen stiff, ribs exposed. The sight reminded me that predators circulated this way, but none had circled us last night, yet. By 0730, the cabin came into view, a squat A-frame built of rough logs raised on stone pilings to let wind slash beneath. Smoke drifted from a small chimney on the lean-to's side. I dismounted, hand on the rifle's grip. "Stay here," I whispered. "I'll check for dangers." I crept forward, boots on packed snow, rifle light on low. The front door was propped ajar by a chunk of wood. I scanned inside, an overturned sled, footprints in blood, but no sign of life. I kicked the door open further. Inside, the cabin's interior was sparse but serviceable, a wood stove fed by logs stacked neatly in a corner. A small table held empty coffee mugs and a half-burned candle. No bodies, no heat signatures, but the stove's metal glowed faint. I keyed my mic. "Clear." Jenna entered behind me. "No one here, but the woodpile's dry. I'll get a fire going. You need to transmit?" I nodded and set up the radio atop a crate. I twisted the knob to channel medevac emergency, 6-digit code only known to sanctioned teams, static. I fiddled with squelch. Finally, a voice. "Rescue 1, this is Eagle Base. Read you 5x5. What's your status?" I exhaled. "We have 7 survivors, wounded, hypothermic. Location is Dead Man's Run cabin, 45 minutes from Pine Ridge Lodge. We need medevac ASAP." The voice responded, "Roger, Rescue 1. Helicopter transfer scheduled at first light. No flight until winds fall below 15 knots. We'll launch refracting flares at 0900 for visual confirmation. Over." I clicked off. "Tomorrow at 0900, we hold here until then." Jenna poured a cup of coffee. I took it gratefully. Inside the cabin, coolness gave way to warmth. The survivors clustered near the stove, sleeping, some moaning. Aaron propped Franklin on the cot against the far wall. Elise rubbed her swollen hands. Marisol hugged Rachel's leg. Jamie leaned against the wall, eyes drifting. The Barnetts sat on a rocking chair, hugging each other. I exhaled, letting the heat settle in my lungs. Jenna joined me. "They'll be okay for now. We need to rotate watches and gather firewood. Supplies are low." I stared at the window, a thin stream of smoke against grey sky. "We'll manage." I checked my watch. We had 14 hours until the chopper arrived. Until then, we'd defend everyone in a cabin on a ridge in the middle of a blizzard's aftermath. I turned to Jenna. "Let's organize. You and Caleb on first watch, Aaron on second. I'll do final. Divide rations. Kids down below. Keep fire low. No visible lights outside. If anything moves in the snow, radio me in code." She nodded, closing her journal. "Understood." We spent the morning stacking logs, siphoning remaining fuel from the snowmobiles into a metal can, melting snow for water, and checking each survivor's status. By midday, Franklin's color returned. He smiled at his daughter, pressed his head against Rachel's. Elise's hands thawed, revealing pink flesh. Jamie could speak in coherent sentences, telling me he'd gotten lost skiing and found the lodge by luck, only to run inside when lights went out. The infected had overtaken the place so fast he couldn't explain. He drifted back into silence halfway through his story. The lodge, now far behind us, seemed like another world. But here, in the cabin, we were temporary guardians. Outside the windows, branches trembled. Wind gusts sporadically rattled the frame. I fed wood into the stove. Each log added a hiss of steam, a plume of smoke. I glanced at the porch, boot prints that had led to the door, now half buried as snow continued to fall. A single hooded jacket lay outside, my own. The survivors clustered around the table at 1100 hours. I handed out half rations of heat-pack stew, bland but warm enough to matter. No one spoke much. They ate slowly, painting their cracked lips with caution, each bite its own small act of survival. By 1400 hours, a low rumble rolled across the ridge. I froze halfway through turning the firewood, one hand still on the iron grate. The sound started faint, then thickened like something big moving through snow miles off. I glanced at Jenna. "Did you hear that?" She nodded, rifle slung across her chest. Possibly a sled or a branch collapse, or it could be more infected. I signaled Caleb to take the drone out again, but snow was falling too thickly for reliable flight. Instead, I strapped on my boots and grabbed a flashlight. "Stay inside," I told everyone else. "I'll check, but be ready to seal the cabin." I pushed the door open. Wind slammed me back. I ignited my hood lamp and swept the light across the clearing. The source of the rumble appeared. A fallen spruce splintered halfway, blocking the old logging road. It must have fallen at the crest of a hill, then slithered down. No movement behind the tree, nothing alive. I exhaled, feeling slightly foolish. "False alarm," I whispered, stepping back inside. By 1700 hours, daylight had thinned into dusk. I moved around the room, checking on each person. They were quiet, drifting near sleep, but no one showed signs of worsening. Core temps held steady. Franklin sat in the corner, gently stroking his daughter's hair. Elise and Mark sat shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked on the fire's glow. Jamie was already out cold on a floor cot. I passed around hot tea cakes from a sealed pouch, dry, starchy, but packed with just enough calories to keep bodies going through another cold night. Jenna cleaned her rifle with calm focus. Caleb checked boots for new tears in the soles. Aaron folded a blanket over the medical kit to keep it dry from cabin condensation. By 2000 hours, the storm had returned. The wind rose fast. Battering gusts and fine pellets of ice slammed against the outer walls and roof like gravel tossed from the dark. I gave the call for lights out by 2200. One by one, people got into layers, zipped coats shut, and folded into their assigned spots near the cabin's center. Jenna and Caleb took the first watch through midnight. Aaron would follow until 400, and I'd take dawn. The room settled into a fragile quiet. Breathing slowed. Blankets shifted. Someone snored. I peeled back one edge of my cover to check Franklin's pulse. Still there. Steady. Calm. At 22:15, Jenna touched my shoulder. "We've got movement," she whispered. I sat up, following her gaze to the frost-rimmed window. Out in the tree line, a single pale shape wove its way between trunks, barely more than a shadow, but unmistakable in the way it moved, gliding, jerking, dipping below snowdrifts, then rising again. Jenna turned toward me, mouthed the word, "infected." I tapped my earpiece. "Marcus here. Watch team. Radio silent, code red." Jenna's voice answered tense. "Roger." I slipped out, careful to make no noise breaking the wooden threshold. The wind gust slammed the door behind me. I pressed against the battered logs, light low. The figure moved slowly, as if stalking prey, 20 feet away. I estimated its body heat was 40 degrees, colder, but still above ground. It raised its head, eyes reflecting faint moonlight. Its posture jerked as if seized by sudden pain. I tapped the shutter button on my rifle's thermal scope. I could see 4 more behind the first, stalking in single file. Their progress was careful but purposeful, undeterred by the storm. I tapped Jenna. 6 inbound from the west. 2 minutes to reach the door. She replied, Understood. I stepped back inside. Everyone wake up, code red. Chaos erupted, bedrolls rustled, ripcords torn, breaths quickened, children began to whimper. The couple and their daughter looked at me in confusion. Infected approaching, I said calmly. Get behind me. I moved to the center of the floor, rifle raised. The group scrambled to edges, huddled next to the fireplace for some cover, clutching each other. Through the window, I saw 6 figures crest the ridge and descend our path. At 20 yards, I fired 2 shots, one grazing the first's neck, the second hit chest. It yelped, stumbling, but its body-proof coat did little to stop the high-velocity round from punching through. Black blood and a spill of frozen tissue froze on contact. It dropped. The second figure emerged from the drift, charged toward the window at 8 MP. I swung and squeezed off 4 rounds, each precisely placed, shattering brain case and splintering skull. I saw a third wheel around, exposed wires where eyes should be, then paused, clawed at its own face. Through the chaos, Jenna's pistol barked. She knocked 2 through the nearest window, each shot accompanied by the hiss of snow shards. The glass shattered inward, shards embedding in wood. Infected bodies thudded against the wall. One slid to the floor on its knees, head dropping forward in a spray of condensation. A fourth charged from woodline, eyes fixed on the broken window. I fired 3 more controlled shots, slugs punching through vest, face caving. Then a 5th and 6th emerged. They looked smaller, weaker. I fired 2 more shots as they hesitated. Bodies slid to the snow, a half-mile of branches shuddering behind them. The only sound left was the roaring heater and the wind's howl. Smoke curled from the fireplace, and the world felt impossibly still. I lowered my rifle, eyes stinging. Jenna entered the cabin, rifle still smoking. "They're down," she said quietly. "No more incoming." I exhaled, tension unraveling. "Seal the windows, barricade the door." She nodded. We used bedboards and chairs to jam the shutters. The survivors huddled behind piles of blankets, faces drained. Rachel started to cry softly. Marisol buried her head in her mother's coat. Aaron set off to check each of them. I walked to Franklin. He kissed his daughter's forehead. "They're gone," I said. He exhaled, but tears gathered. "Thank you." I touched his arm. "They won't get you." By 02:30 hours, I took my position behind the stove, rifle across my lap. The room had gone still again, just the low hiss of wind outside and the occasional pop from the logs. Jenna reloaded quietly beside me, tracing her eyes along the cabin walls, reviewing breach points in her mind like a checklist. Light from the embers flickered across the log beams, shadows moving like silent figures. I blinked slowly. Sleep crept at the edges of my vision. My thoughts drifted, snow stained red, a pane of glass cracking, the distant slap of a child's cry echoing through white trees. I forced my focus back to the hallway, gripping the rifle harder. At 0400 hours, Aaron tapped my shoulder. "Your turn." His voice was low, careful not to stir the others. The survivors lay huddled together under blankets like a single mass of limbs and coats. Jenna had curled into the far corner, her rifle propped under her head like a makeshift pillow. Caleb handed me a bottle of broth he'd kept near the stove. I drank it slowly, lukewarm, a little metallic, but enough to push the fog from my mind. I stood, stretched my knees just enough to get blood moving, then stepped to the hallway entrance. From there, I had a narrow line of sight down to the front door and its fragile patchwork of boards and snow-packed cracks. If anything moved, I'd see it, or at least I hoped I would. The hours passed slow. My breath puffed pale clouds in front of my face, and each groan from the timbered roof echoed like footsteps in my skull. The storm began to ease, howling winds replaced by a gentle hush. Heavy flakes fell straight down, visible through gaps in the roofline. I didn't trust it. The calm never meant safety. By 0600 hours I felt it, thin warmth brushing my back. I turned slightly. A single beam of pale sunlight filtered through a gap in the shingles, casting gold onto the stove's edge. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. I exhaled loudly. "Jenna, shift!" She slid into position, tucking her rifle muzzle between her boots. I returned to the group and checked each one. Franklin and his family were asleep but breathing steadily. Jamie lay against the stove, breathing shallow. Elise and Mark held each other, The woodpile had diminished to a few logs. Fire would fizzle out in 2 hours. I stepped outside to gather fresh wood, pine logs 10 feet from the cabin. As I dragged 2 into place, I felt frostbite creeping into my fingertips. I returned to feed the stove at 0630 hours. The fire caught quickly this time, and the renewed warmth rippled through the cabin. Blankets shifted. Groggy faces turned toward the light. At 0700, I switched on the radio and keyed the mic. Team 1 to Eagle Base. We confirm safe staging at Deadman's Run cabin. 6 survivors stable, 1 critical, ready for medevac. Over. A pause, then static broke into a voice. Rescue 1, Eagle Base. Helicopter ETA 0915 hours. Use refracting flares at that time. Over. Relief didn't hit all at once. It crept in like heat from the stove, subtle but real. I looked at Jenna, the breath from my mouth curling upward. We've got a little time, I said. Enough to get everyone ready. She gave a quiet nod. Once we have visual, we launch the 2 flares. Until then, stay tight. No one outside. By 0745, I ran a head count. Franklin, Rachel, Tom, Marisol, Mark, Elise, Jamie, 7 civilians, then the 4 of us, Aaron, Jenna, Caleb, and me. 11 total. We needed 10 seats. Maybe the pilot could stretch it to 11. Franklin's arm was bad but stable. Jamie could walk short distances, barely. We had to make it work. Aaron prepped final rations, 1 more round of warm broth and energy chews. Jenna cleaned each rifle 1 last time, checked each magazine, then stashed backups in her coat. Caleb moved between the radio and supply kits, testing the emergency transponder and backup flare gun. Everything had to work. There wouldn't be a second run. At 0850, the first thump of rotor blades rolled across the trees, distant but clear. The sound wasn't fast. It was heavy, controlled, military. I stepped to the door, gripped the latch, and looked back at the group. It's coming, I said. Prepare the flares. We moved outside into the cold. I rubbed my gloves together, loosening joints. The survivors hesitated. I approached Franklin. He steadied himself. You'll be the first on the sled, I said. He nodded, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. She and Marisol knelt beside, tears freezing on cheeks. I hugged Marisol gently. You'll be safe soon. Jenna stepped away to prepare the flare gun. I checked the wind, swirling, unpredictable. The chopper's roar grew to a rasp. Just beyond the tree line, its shape broke through the grey horizon, an 8H60 medevac markings clear on the side. I trained my eyes on its approach. Jenna squinted at me to raise the flare. I counted 1 2 seconds past 9:08. I raised the flare pistol, angled upward at 45 degrees, and squeezed the trigger. A trailing arc of bright orange hissed into the sky, crackling. The flare curved, then split into a burst of luminescence, like a frozen sun. Inside, the chopper banked toward our signal. The downdraft slammed snow into the cabin, rattling walls. I kept the flare aloft until it fizzled out. Jenna dropped to the ground and sprang up. "It saw us!" she yelled. I heard the chopper's rotor blades closer. "Cut the boards!" I grabbed an axe from inside the cabin's entrance and swung. The boards splintered. We yanked them free, racing to clear the door. Snow whipped in. The chopper touched down 20 yards away, landing on compacted snow. A rear ramp dropped, and 2 flight medics emerged in white parkas. "Move! Move!" one yelled, as Marines stowed the rotor wash's blast with heavy gear. I directed Aaron to load Franklin's sled. 2 Marines flattened the sled's runners, latching Franklin's body to a stretcher that extended out to the ramp. He squeezed my hand briefly. "Thank you," he said. I squeezed his shoulder. "Hold tight." Jenna ushered Rachel and Marisol forward, each boarded with Aaron, Caleb, and a paramedic. Next came Mark and Elise. Jamie struggled to keep up, but a medic lifted him onto the ramp. I watched until he was safe inside, then stepped back. One paramedic approached me. "You're next. Marcus Hernandez?" I nodded. He clipped my arm brace to a harness that descended into the cabin. I reached in and lifted Jenna, hugged her hard. "You saved them." I boarded last as the chopper's ramp lifted. The helicopter roared, rotors slinging snow. We rose, tilting south. Below, the cabin receded, smoke curling up. The world felt hollow. I exhaled, letting the wind out. Inside, I saw Aaron seated with Franklin, Rachel, and Marisol, wrapping blankets around them, checking vitals. I sank into a seat next to Jenna, who held her rifle in her lap. The chopper banked east, heading toward Eagle Base. The survivors slept, faces pale but peaceful. I closed my eyes, the warmth of the cabin replaced by the hum of the engines. Dawn had come. Pine Ridge Lodge still loomed in the distance, a frozen echo of horror. But tonight, these people would live. That was enough. Enough. I drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by the memory of pale faces in the snow and the voices we couldn't save. The war wasn't over, but for now, we'd won one battle, and that was something. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.